The bridge of the UES Wanderer shook as another system failed somewhere deep in the ship's belly. Captain Jake Morrison didn't even look up from his reports anymore when these things happened. On any other vessel in the United Earth Fleet, such failures would send crews running to fix the problem. Here they just added it to the long list of things that needed repair. "Captain, the coffee maker in Deck 3 is broken again," Lieutenant Amy Collins called out from her engineering station. Her voice carried the same tired tone that everyone on the ship had developed over the past year. "Add it to the list," Morrison replied, running his hand through his graying hair. At 42, he looked older than his years. Command of the Wanderer had a way of aging people quickly. The ship around them told the story of their situation better than any report could. The walls were a patchwork of different metals, some shiny and new, others dull and scratched from years of use. The bridge itself had been salvaged from 3 different ships and nothing quite matched. Some buttons were blue, others green, and a few had no color left at all. Morrison looked around at his crew and wondered not for the first time what he had done to deserve this assignment. Each person on the bridge represented someone that other captains didn't want. The fleet had sent him their problems, their misfits, their failures. Lieutenant Collins was brilliant with machines. Everyone agreed on that. She could make broken engines run and dead computers come back to life. The problem was that she didn't follow orders very well. Her last captain had recommended her transfer after she rewired his entire ship without permission. The changes had made everything work better, but rules were rules. Sergeant Pete Johnson sat at the weapons station looking bored. He was a Marine who had been kicked out of 3 different elite units. Not for being bad at his job. Everyone said he was one of the best soldiers they had ever seen. The problem was that he didn't fight the way Marines were supposed to fight. He was too creative, too willing to try new things. Elite units didn't like soldiers who thought outside the box. Dr. Lisa Brown worked quietly at the science station, checking readings that nobody else cared about. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life. Her theories about how aliens might think and act had been laughed at by other scientists. They said her ideas were too strange, too different from accepted thinking. So they sent her to a ship where her strange ideas wouldn't bother anyone important. Communications Officer Tony Martinez was perhaps the strangest of them all. He could speak 15 different alien languages and understand dozens more. The problem was that he couldn't talk to humans very well. He was shy, awkward, and said the wrong things at the wrong times. Other crews found him uncomfortable to be around. Morrison knew that he fit right in with the rest of them. His crime had been speaking up when he thought his superiors were making mistakes. The fleet didn't like officers who questioned orders, even when those officers were right. So they gave him the Wanderer and told him to keep his opinions to himself. The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. "Captain Morrison to the communications center. Priority message incoming." Morrison sighed and stood up. Priority messages usually meant more bad news. He walked through corridors that looked like they belonged in a museum, past pipes that leaked and lights that flickered. The Wanderer was built from parts of ships that were too old or too damaged to fix properly. Everything worked, barely, but nothing worked well. The communication center was a small room filled with equipment from a dozen different manufacturers. Tony Martinez sat in front of the main screen, his face pale with worry. "What is it, Tony?" Morrison asked. "It's from Fleet Command, sir. The Galactic Council has declared war on humanity. All ships are being recalled to defend Earth and the core worlds." Morrison felt his stomach drop. War with the aliens had been a possibility for months, but he had hoped the diplomats would find a way to avoid it. The aliens looked down on humans as a young, primitive species. They thought humans had no right to travel among the stars. "Are we being recalled too?" Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. Tony shook his head. "No, sir. We're being assigned to patrol the Outer Rim. The message says we should watch for alien scouts and report any unusual activity." Morrison almost laughed. Patrol the Outer Rim was military speak for stay out of the way. The fleet was sending the Wanderer as far from the real fighting as possible. They didn't trust his ship or his crew to handle anything important. He returned to the bridge and gathered his crew around the main table. The faces looking back at him showed a mixture of disappointment and resignation. They had all been expecting this. "You all heard about the war," Morrison began, "and you probably guessed that we won't be fighting alongside the main fleet. They're sending us to patrol empty space while real ships do the fighting," Collins said bitterly. "That's right," Morrison admitted. "But I want you all to know something. Every person on this ship is here because someone else thought you weren't good enough. They thought you were too different, too strange, too willing to break the rules." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "But I've seen what you can do. Collins, you've kept this bucket of bolts running when it should have fallen apart months ago. Johnson, you've trained our security teams better than any Marine instructor I've ever met. Brown, your research has helped us understand alien behavior in ways the fleet manual never could. Martinez, you've established communication protocols that have prevented 3 different incidents from becoming shooting wars." The crew looked surprised. Morrison rarely gave speeches, and he had never praised them like this before. "The fleet thinks we're useless," Morrison continued. "They think this ship is junk and we're all failures. Maybe they're right. But I've learned something in my years of command. Sometimes the people everyone else gives up on are the ones who surprise you the most." He stood up and walked to the main view screen, which showed the stars ahead of them. "We're going to the outer rim, and we're going to do our job. We're going to patrol that empty space and watch for alien scouts. But we're going to do it our way, not their way." Collins smiled for the first time in weeks. "Does that mean I can finally install those engine modifications I've been working on?" "It means you can do whatever you think will help this ship and this crew," Morrison replied. "The fleet has written us off. That means we're free to be ourselves." Johnson cracked his knuckles. "I've got some ideas about new combat training methods. And I want to set up better sensor arrays to study any aliens we encounter," Brown added. Morrison nodded. "Do it all. We may be the fleet's unwanted children, but we're still Earth's defenders, and who knows? Maybe being different will turn out to be exactly what we need." As the Wanderer jumped to hyperspace, heading for the outer rim, none of them knew that their exile would place them at the center of humanity's greatest challenge. The war that was about to begin would test everything they thought they knew about themselves and their place in the galaxy. 3 months had passed since the war began, and the Wanderer had seen nothing but empty space and distant stars. The outer rim was exactly as boring as everyone had expected it to be. The crew had fallen into a routine of checking sensors, running, repairs, and trying not to think about the real war happening far away. Captain Morrison was reviewing supply reports when Tony Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's very weak, coming from the Kepler system." Morrison set down his reports and headed for the bridge. The Kepler system was supposed to be empty. No human colonies, no alien outposts, nothing but dead planets orbiting a dying star. "How weak is the signal?" Morrison asked as he took his seat. "Very weak, sir. It's not like any human distress signal I've heard before. The pattern is strange, almost like it's very old." Dr. Brown looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'd like to investigate. If it's an old signal, it might be from a species we haven't met before." Morrison thought about it. Their orders were to patrol and report unusual activity. A mystery signal definitely counted as unusual. "Set course for the Kepler system. Let's see what we can find." The jump to hyperspace took 6 hours. When they dropped back into normal space, the Wanderer's sensors immediately began scanning the system. What they found made no sense. "Captain, I'm reading 5 planets, just like the charts say," Collins reported. "But the 3rd planet is showing some very strange readings." "What kind of strange?" Morrison asked. "There are structures on the surface, big ones, but they're not showing up on normal scans. I only found them because our sensors are so messed up that they scan on frequencies most ships don't use." Dr. Brown was already running her own scans. "Captain, these readings are incredible. Those structures are made from materials I've never seen before. They're definitely not human, and they don't match any known alien technology." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Finding unknown alien ruins was the kind of discovery that could change everything. "Can you tell how old they are?" "The decay pattern suggests they're very old, maybe millions of years. But Captain, there's something else. The distress signal is coming from the planet's surface. From the ruins? Yes, sir. It's like something down there is still active after all this time. Morrison made his decision quickly. Collins, take us into orbit. Brown, I want full scans of everything down there. Johnson, prep a landing team. We're going down to take a look. Sir, Tony Martinez said quietly. Should we report this to Fleet Command first? Morrison thought about it. By regulations, he should report the discovery and wait for orders. But he also knew what would happen. Fleet Command would send a proper exploration ship with proper scientists and proper equipment. The Wanderer would be pushed aside and forgotten. We'll report it after we know what we're dealing with, Morrison said. We're the ones who found it. We should be the ones to investigate it first. The landing team consisted of Morrison, Dr. Brown, Sergeant Johnson, and 2 Marines. They took one of the Wanderer's small shuttles down to the planet's surface. The world below was dead and gray with no atmosphere and no signs of life. The ruins were massive. Towers and domes stretched across kilometers of barren landscape, all built from a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Everything was covered in strange symbols that looked like nothing any human had ever seen. The symbols are beautiful, Dr. Brown said as they walked through what might have been a city center. They're not just writing. They're art and mathematics and language all combined into one system. Johnson kept his weapon ready as he scanned for threats. This place gives me the creeps. It's too quiet, too empty. They followed the distress, signaled to a large dome in the center of the ruins. The entrance was sealed, but Collins had given them some of her modified equipment. The seal opened easily when they applied the right frequency. Inside, the dome was filled with machines that hummed with quiet power. Lights began coming on as they entered, as if the building was waking up after a long sleep. How is this place still running after millions of years? Morrison asked. Dr. Brown was already studying the machines with her scanners. Captain, these readings are impossible. The power source is completely stable. No decay, no loss of efficiency. And the computers, they're still active. She moved to what looked like a control panel and placed her hand on it. The moment her skin touched the surface, the entire room came alive. Screens lit up showing star maps and data streams that moved too fast to follow. Dr. Brown, step back, Johnson ordered, raising his weapon. No, wait, Brown said, her eyes wide with wonder. It's not dangerous. It's responding to me, to human neural patterns. Look at this. The screens were showing images now. Star systems, planets, and ships that looked nothing like human or known alien designs. And then they saw something that made them all freeze. The screens showed the current war. Human ships fighting alien vessels in battles that had happened just weeks ago. Somehow this ancient computer system was monitoring the entire galaxy in real time. How is this possible? Morrison asked. I don't know, Brown replied, her hands moving over the controls as if she had been using them her whole life. But Captain, there's more. This system has records of thousands of different species and most of them are gone. Destroyed. She brought up new images, worlds burning, ships being destroyed, entire civilizations being wiped out. And in every image, they saw the same attackers, the aliens that humanity was now fighting. The hegemony, Morrison said quietly. They've done this before. Many times, Brown confirmed. According to these records, they've been destroying species they consider inferior for thousands of years. They call themselves the Great Purifiers of the Galaxy. Johnson studied the tactical data flowing across the screens. Captain, this system has detailed information about their ships, their weapons, their strategies, everything. Morrison felt his heart racing. They had stumbled onto something that could change the entire war. But there was still one big question. Why is this responding to humans? Who built this place? Dr. Brown worked with the computers for another hour, digging deeper into the ancient files. Finally, she found what they were looking for. They called themselves the Architects, she said. They were the last species the hegemony tried to destroy before they went into hiding. But they didn't just hide. They built these monitoring stations. All across the galaxy, they've been watching and waiting. Waiting for what? For a species like us. The computers only respond to neural patterns that match a specific profile. Intelligence combined with creativity, logic mixed with intuition, the ability to adapt and change quickly. The architects were looking for a species that could succeed where they failed. Morrison looked around at the ancient machines, all humming with power and filled with knowledge that could save humanity. And they found us. Not just us, Captain. They found humans who think differently. The computer systems won't respond to normal human neural patterns. They only work for people who are unusual, creative, willing to break rules and try new things. Morrison almost laughed. The galaxy's greatest discovery could only be used by misfits and outcasts. The very people that the fleet considered useless were the only ones who could access this ancient technology. "Can we take any of this back to the ship?" he asked. "Some of it. The architects designed portable components that can be integrated with other technology. But Captain, I don't think normal ships will be able to use them properly." "But the Wanderer isn't a normal ship," Morrison said with a smile. "And we're not a normal crew." Lieutenant Collins had never been happier in her entire life. The architect technology that Dr. Brown brought back from the planet was like nothing she had ever seen before. The components seemed to understand what she wanted to do before she even touched them. "This is impossible," she muttered as she worked in the engine room, connecting architect power cells to the Wanderer's old systems. "These parts shouldn't work with our technology. They're millions of years old and built by completely different beings." But they did work. Better than work, actually. The moment she connected the first power cell, the ship's engines began running, smoother than they had in years. The second cell fixed the artificial gravity problems they had been having for months. The third cell somehow made their hyperspace drive twice as fast. Captain Morrison watched from the doorway as Collins worked her magic. "How much of this stuff can we integrate without breaking the ship?" "I don't think we can break it, Captain," Collins replied, wiping grease from her hands. The architect components seem to adapt to whatever system they're connected to. It's like they learn how to work with our technology. 3 weeks had passed since their discovery of the ruins. The crew had spent every day installing architect components and learning how to use them. The results were amazing. Their weapons now fired energy beams that could change frequency in mid-flight. Their shields could become solid one moment and let friendly fire pass through the next moment. Their sensors could detect ships hiding behind planets, but they hadn't had a chance to test any of it in real combat. The outer rim was still empty and quiet. That changed when Tony Martinez picked up a series of emergency broadcasts from the Centauri colonies. "Captain, multiple distress calls coming in," Tony announced from his station. "The hegemony is attacking civilian settlements. They're destroying everything." Morrison felt his blood run cold. The Centauri colonies were home to millions of people. Families, children, people who had never hurt anyone. "How far away?" 2 days at maximum speed," Collins called out from engineering. "But with the architect modifications, I think we can make it in 18 hours. "Do it," Morrison ordered. "All hands prepare for combat. This is what we've been training for." Dr. Brown looked up from her science station, worry clear on her face. "Captain, the distress calls mention at least 5 hegemony battleships. We're just one small patrol vessel. We're not the same ship that left Earth 3 months ago," Morrison replied. "And we're definitely not the same crew." The jump to hyperspace felt different now. Smoother, faster, more controlled. The architect technology had changed everything about how the Wanderer moved through space. When they dropped back into normal space near Centauri, they found exactly what the distress calls had described. 5 massive hegemony battleships were systematically destroying everything in the system. Orbital stations burned like dying stars. Colony ships tried to escape but were hunted down and destroyed. The aliens were not just winning the battle, they were committing murder. "Sergeant Johnson, what's our tactical situation?" Morrison asked. Johnson studied the enemy positions on his modified display screens. The architect technology was showing him information that normal sensors would never detect. They're spread out, probably to make sure no ships escape. Their weapons are focused on the civilian targets. They're not expecting any real resistance. Good. That gives us an advantage. Collins, can our new weapons punch through their shields? Only one way to find out, Captain, Collins replied. But the Architect combat data suggests our weapons will be very effective against hegemony technology. Morrison made his decision. Tony, open a channel to all civilian ships in the area. Tell them to run toward the outer planets. We'll keep the hegemony busy. Sir, Tony said quietly. Should I also contact the hegemony ships? What would I say to them? I've been studying their language and culture using the Architect data. They respect strength and despise weakness. Maybe if we challenge them directly, they'll focus on us instead of the civilians. Morrison thought about it. One small human ship challenging 5 battleships would sound insane to any reasonable person. But nothing about their situation was reasonable. Do it, tell them that the Wanderer is here to stop them. Tony's broadcast went out on all hegemony frequencies. The response was immediate. Alien voices filled the communication channels, some laughing, others angry. The translations appeared on Morrison's screen. Foolish humans think one tiny ship can face us, one alien commander said. We will destroy you quickly and return to our work. The 5 battleships began turning toward the Wanderer, their massive weapons charging for battle. Morrison watched the enemy ships move and felt surprisingly calm. The Architect tactical data was flowing through his mind, showing him possibilities he had never imagined. Collins, reroute all power to weapons and shields. Johnson, I want firing solutions on all 5 targets. Brown, start jamming their communications. Tony, keep monitoring their tactical channels. The first hegemony ship fired, sending a massive energy beam toward the Wanderer, but the beam passed right through the ship without doing any damage. Phase. Shields working perfectly, Collins reported. They can't hit us while we're out of phase. Morrison smiled. But we can hit them. Johnson, target their lead ship. Fire when ready. The Wanderer's weapons fired, but instead of the normal red energy beams, blue-white lightning erupted from their guns. The energy struck the hegemony battleship's shields and didn't bounce off. Instead, it passed right through and hit the ship's hull directly. The alien vessel exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. Dead silence filled the communication channels. The remaining 4 hegemony ships stopped moving as if their crews couldn't believe what they had just seen. Impossible, one alien commander finally said. No human weapon can penetrate our shields. These aren't normal human weapons, Morrison replied over the open channel. And we're not a normal human crew. The battle that followed was unlike anything in military history. The Wanderer moved through space in ways that broke every rule of physics. It could phase in and out of normal space, making it impossible to track or target. Its weapons fired energy that ignored shields and armor, striking directly at ship systems. But the real advantage was the crew. Collins rerouted power through systems that shouldn't have been able to handle the load, somehow making their weapons more powerful with each shot. Johnson used targeting patterns that confused the hegemony computers, hitting weak spots that shouldn't have existed. Brown analyzed alien behavior in real time, predicting their moves before they made them. Tony intercepted their communications and sent false orders that made the enemy ships crash into each other. In 30 minutes, 4 more hegemony battleships became burning wreckage, floating in space. The surviving civilian ships sent messages of thanks and disbelief. News of the battle spread through human space faster than hyperspace travel. The Wanderer, the ship that everyone had laughed at, had just destroyed an entire hegemony battle group single-handed. But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony would send more ships, bigger fleets, deadlier weapons. And somewhere, out there, the real war was still being fought by people who had no idea what the Wanderer had just discovered. Tony, send a message to Fleet Command, Morrison ordered. Tell them we've engaged and defeated a hegemony force at Centauri. Include all tactical data from the battle. Should I mention the Architect technology, sir? Morrison thought about it. The fleet would want to study the technology, control it, make it fit their standard procedures. They would take away everything that made it special. Not yet, he decided. Let's see what they make of the battle report first. The response came 6 hours later. Fleet Command didn't believe the report. They thought it was a mistake or a lie. One small patrol ship couldn't possibly defeat 5 battleships. Morrison looked around at his crew and smiled. Let the fleet think what they wanted. The Wanderer had work to do. 6 months after the battle at Centauri, the war had changed completely. The Wanderer had become a legend throughout human space. Stories spread of the impossible ship that could appear anywhere, destroy entire enemy fleets, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. The hegemony was retreating from dozens of systems. Other human ships had started copying the Wanderer's tactics, but none of them could match their success. The architect technology only worked properly for crews who thought differently. Captain, priority message from Earth, Tony Martinez announced. Admiral Parker wants to speak with you directly. Morrison sighed. He had been avoiding fleet command for weeks, but he knew this conversation had to happen eventually. Put him through. Admiral Parker's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and angry. Captain Morrison, I want to know what's really happening out there. Your ship has destroyed more enemy vessels in 6 months than the rest of the fleet combined. How? We've gotten better at working together, sir, Morrison replied carefully. Don't give me that garbage, Parker snapped. I've seen the tactical reports. Your ship is using technology that doesn't exist, weapons that ignore shields, engines that break the laws of physics, sensors that see through space itself. Where did you get it? Morrison looked around at his crew. They had discussed this moment many times. The decision was unanimous. We found something, Admiral. Ancient alien technology that responds to human neural patterns, but only certain types of humans can use it properly. Parker's expression changed from anger to interest. I'm sending a team of experts to examine this technology. You will cooperate fully. I'm afraid that won't work, sir, Morrison said. The technology only responds to people who think in unconventional ways. Your experts won't be able to use it. We'll see about that. Return to Earth immediately for debriefing. Morrison shook his head. Can't do that, Admiral. We just received reports that the hegemony is massing their entire fleet for an attack on Earth. Every ship they have left, over 2,000 vessels. They're going to try to end the war with one massive strike. Parker's face went pale. How? Do you know this? The same way we know everything else, Morrison replied. We have better information sources than anyone else. The attack will begin in 72 hours. Then get back here now. We need every ship for the defense. Morrison looked at his crew again. Dr. Brown nodded slightly. She had been studying the architect data for months and she had found something important. Admiral, the hegemony isn't just trying to destroy Earth, Morrison explained. They're trying to destroy the idea of humanity itself. They want to prove that species like us should never be allowed to exist. If they win this battle, they'll use it as an example to terrify every other species in the galaxy. All the more reason for you to join the defense fleet, Parker said. No, sir. We're going to do something else. Something that will end this war permanently. Morrison cut the communication before Parker could respond. The bridge was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what had just happened. They had just committed mutiny against the entire Earth fleet. Are you sure about this plan? Collins asked from her engineering station. Dr. Brown answered for Morrison. The architect records show that the hegemony has one fatal weakness. Their entire society is based on rigid hierarchy and absolute obedience. When their plans fail, they can't adapt quickly enough to recover. And if we're wrong? Johnson asked. Then we all die as traitors instead of heroes, Morrison replied. But if we're right, we can save not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy. The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace, heading not toward Earth but toward the hegemony staging area. The architect technology had revealed the location of the enemy fleet, gathered in a system far from any inhabited worlds. When they arrived, Morrison had to resist the urge to simply run away. Over 2,000 alien warships filled the space around them. The smallest ships were larger than Earth's biggest battleships. The largest were the size of small moons. Tony, can you tap into their communication networks? Morrison asked. Already done, Captain. The architect technology makes it easy. I can not only listen to their communications, I can send messages that look like they're coming from their own commanders. Perfect. Brown, what do we know about their command structure? Dr. Brown had spent months studying hegemony psychology using the architect data. They have 3 separate command groups that don't trust each other: the military commanders, the political leaders, and the religious authorities. Each group thinks they should be in charge of the final attack. Morrison smiled. And what would happen if each group thought the others were trying to betray them? Their entire fleet would fall apart, Brown replied. But Captain, we'd have to make them believe that their own leaders are traitors. That's almost impossible. Not with what we know about them, Morrison said. Tony, I want you to send messages to all 3 command groups. Make each group think the other 2 are planning to attack Earth without them, keeping all the glory for themselves. What happened next was the most complex psychological warfare operation in human history. Tony used the architect communication technology to forge messages that looked perfectly authentic. Each hegemony command group received evidence that the others were planning to betray them. The military commanders were told that the politicians planned to claim credit for the victory. The politicians learned that the religious leaders wanted to turn the attack into a holy war. The religious authorities discovered that the military was planning to ignore their sacred protocols. Within hours, the massive hegemony fleet began turning their weapons on each other. It's working, Brown reported with amazement. They're so focused on their internal power struggles that they've forgotten about attacking Earth. But Morrison wasn't finished. He had studied the architect records and learned about the hegemony's greatest secret. They weren't the mighty empire they pretended to be. They were actually a small group of bullies who controlled other species through fear and lies. Tony, open a channel to every ship in the hegemony fleet. Not just the commanders, but every single crew member. That's thousands of different frequencies, Captain. The architect technology can handle it. Send this message to everyone. Morrison's voice went out across the entire enemy fleet, translated into hundreds of different alien languages. He told them the truth about their empire, how the hegemony leadership had lied to them about the species they had destroyed, how those inferior races had actually been peaceful peoples who posed no threat, how the hegemony had committed genocide, not for protection but for power. The response was immediate and devastating. Crew members on ships throughout the fleet began refusing orders. Some vessels broke away from the formation entirely. Others turned their weapons on their own command ships. The hegemony fleet, the most powerful military force in known space, destroyed itself in less than 6 hours. When the shooting stopped, Morrison sent one final message to the survivors. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Wanderer. The war is over. Any ship that wants to surrender will be treated fairly. Any ship that wants to continue fighting will be destroyed. Most of the surviving ships chose surrender. News of the hegemony fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had lived in fear for thousands of years suddenly realized they were free. The great empire that had terrorized the galaxy had fallen not to superior weapons but to the truth. Morrison sat in his captain's chair and looked around at his crew. These misfits and outcasts had just won the most important war in galactic history. They had done it not by following orders or using standard tactics, but by being exactly who they were. So what do we do now? Collins asked. Morrison thought about it. The fleet would want them to return to Earth and explain everything. They would want to study the architect technology and turn it into standard military equipment. They would want to make the Wanderer into just another Navy ship. We keep exploring, Morrison decided. The galaxy is full of lost civilizations and forgotten peoples. Someone needs to find them and help them, and I can't think of anyone better for the job than a crew of people who don't fit in anywhere else. The Wanderer turned away from the wreckage of the hegemony fleet and jumped back into hyperspace. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was free for the first time in thousands of years. Ahead of them lay infinite possibilities and new adventures. The useless ship had proven itself legendary, just as Morrison had always believed it could.